All right, let's talk Alabama Crimson Tide. They have been on a recruiting tear. That's undeniable. We've seen the results over the past couple weeks, but when you break down everything that's happened, and we can take a step back, I know it's a crazy time right now, and just looking at what's going on, it's clear Kalen DeBoer, this Crimson Tide coaching staff, the entire program doing a great job, and we got a couple reports and some interesting data to show you guys. But first, I am Nick, that is Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, like I mentioned in the opening, and as you Tide fans probably are well aware of at this point, they have been kicking all kinds of tail on the recruiting game, dominating across the board. Let's pull up one of the more recent tweets, courtesy of Hayes Fawcett on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it these days, highlighting exactly how dominant the Crimson Tide have been in the recruiting game over the past days, weeks, months for the 2026 class. Again, if you want to throw it up on the screen, this is a courtesy of Hayes Fawcett. He says Alabama recruiting is on another level right now. Fire emoji. The Crimson Tide now have five stars committed. Xavier Griffin at linebacker, Edwards at safety, Crowell at running back, Morgan at wide receiver, and Edmonds at cornerback. The closest schools have two. So again, to put that in context, Alabama currently, by the time we're filming this, a lot of crazy things are happening. They could have more by the time you watch this. Have five stars committed in the 2026 class. The next closest class only has two. So that's obviously an impressive accomplishment. But when you take a step back and look at Alabama's recruiting class for 2026 in general and try and say, okay, how dominant are they? How quality of a player are they getting? I tell you what, folks, the data tells a completely powerful story for the Crimson Tide. Let's pull up the chart right now to highlight what I'm talking about. So this is the top six classes in the 2026 for the 2026 class, the top six schools, excuse me, in the 2026 class, according to 24/7 Sports. And it is ranked in order of quality of the average recruit, right? The highest average recruit score. And one thing you'll notice, right? We go, Alabama has the highest average recruit score. That kind of highlights what we're talking about before with five stars. That would make sense. Followed by Notre Dame, Ohio State, Texas A&M, USC, and then Georgia. But what you will notice, Tide fans, anyone watching this video, is that there's a clear cluster, right? You can see Notre Dame, Ohio State, Texas A&M, USC, Georgia a little less, but you can see those four schools right there in the middle. They're really clustered together, right? 2 through 5 on this list are right there. They're just really, really close. There's not a lot of delta. Where is the massive gap? It's Alabama with their quality recruit. That's a massive delta between them and Notre Dame, them Ohio State, them A&M, them USC, and of course a bigger gap when you get between Alabama and Georgia. And that delta right there, that is very important. It's not a big number in terms of raw data, but it speaks to the separation that Kalen DeBoer and his staff, the entire recruiting program in Tuscaloosa right now, the job they've done separating, pulling away from the pack, because these other schools, Notre Dame, A&M, USC, Ohio State, they've been doing a great job in recruiting. Georgia too, right? Kirby Smart, no joke. These are recruiting schools at an incredibly high level right now. They've been crushing it. But what Alabama has done is on another level. It's on another planet. They've pulled away. They've separated in terms of their average quality of the recruit. We know the headlines have been going around about Kalen DeBoer and with some alleged help with Nick Saban. We won't get into those rumors, but overall, what he's done, what this program has done, they've done a great job. I don't think people understand statistically how great they are. Completely separated. The gap between Alabama number 1 and Notre Dame number 2 in terms of average recruit quality is larger than the gap between 2 Notre Dame and 6 Georgia. Right? They are lapping the field. They are pulling away. This is a great job by DeBoer, his staff, all the assistants and recruiting coordinators, program. Everyone in this level right now has done a phenomenal job. People need to remember this chart and focus on this, because this level of separation, this is indicative of the Saban dynasty, where there were other schools that would have great years and other schools that would have good classes, but Alabama was always clearly a cut above, and it looks like it has returned for the 2026 recruiting class. And if this holds, and I think there's no reason to think it won't, the Crimson Tide in short order seem to be highly likely to return to their former glory. And I say former, we're talking 4 years. I tell you what, SEC, that's a tough break. You thought with Nick Saban gone, you were going to finally get a relief. If this data holds true, that won't be the case. The Tide will be returning to the top of the college football world in no time at all. All right, Miles, I know you've got a few thoughts on this, but first, Alabama fans, in the comment section below. So far, what has been the most impressive recruit or the recruit you like the most in the 2026 class? Look, it's early. We understand that things can change. And look, a lot of these kids, they haven't even played their senior year of high school football yet. A lot of things can change. But at this point, if you could just call it as you see it right now, who has been the most impressive recruit in your mind for the 2026 class for the Crimson Tide? Put them in the comment section below. But Mize, over to you now. What are your thoughts on this latest news and just everything going on, especially this data? It's crazy stuff for the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, Nate, like you said, it's crazy data. First of all, like their average recruit score is great. I think it's good, and they got 19 recruits, so it's not just like a team that has 6 recruits in there and there's like super high. They've got a fair amount of recruits in there. Other teams are in the 20s, so they're right there with them as far as the amount of recruits that Alabama has brought in. So I think that's really important to consider in here as well. But the other things that I'm seeing here out of Alabama is just they're getting back to dominance. I think that's a thing. You can have a really great, recruiting class, but when you talk about dominance, like you said a few times, and I think it's important. This is what Alabama is trending towards again. You think 5-star recruits, or that's what pops into my head. When you can get the top dogs to start coming back to your school, I think that shows you're on a trend, you're on a good path. And it's not just they're going all around the country trying to get guys. We've talked about this before with the Crimson Tide. They're doing it the right way. The recruits they're getting, they have their most recruits, 5 guys out of the state of Alabama. Some of their 5-star guys out of the state of Alabama. At least 2 of them are. Then we look then next here. Oh, they go over to Georgia. They got 4 guys out of the state of Georgia, 2 guys out of the state of Florida, then some onesies all around the country as far as that goes. But the core SEC, the core is in their general vicinity. They're dominating their area, doing a really good job. We talk about it all the time. That's how you need to recruit. Kalen DeBoer, a little bit different the last couple classes, really reined it in this 2026 class. And quite frankly, it doesn't matter who's helping him or who's not helping him. If he's getting the job done, that's all that matters. And this class, this 2026 class, looks absolutely fantastic. This is the type of Alabama recruiting class that people are used to seeing. This is the type of class that I think is really going to turn this program around. As far as they're not far, they were really close to where they needed to be. So when I say turn it around, we're talking, going like a 10-degree course shift. They're right there, but now we're going to a team that's going to start making deep college football playoff pushes, being a contender, not being, an underdog and outside, horse to go into the college football race. They're going to start to be leading that pack. These are the kind of recruiting classes we need to see. And I think everybody is starting to know this. Kalen DeBoer, this program, everything that's going on in Alabama is back up to snuff, like you said. Not very long, 4 years or so, however long it was, but they're back in the running now to be one of the top teams. I think people really need to start to be nervous about what's going on in Tuscaloosa because this team is looking very dangerous, especially on the recruiting trail.
And certainly so when you consider the fact that they only have in their recruiting class right now one prospect, one recruit in the top 20 list according to 24/7 Sports, excuse me. So we're looking at a Crimson Tide recruiting class that's not like heavily weighted that they got, one 5-star quarterback, right? The number 1 kid in the country, and then another top 10 kid, and that heavily weights the class. No, this is across the board, almost every single person, elite, 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 right? They haven't just been heavily, just like one 5-star number 2 kid in the country, and then that just scales everything in that direction. They've gotten quality guys across the roster. You saw the names of list we brought up earlier. It's not like they got like 3 running backs or something bonkers. This is a complete team, offense, defense, a solid recruiting effort across the board for the Alabama Crimson Tide. And I think this is one of the things that the big question mark with Kalen DeBoer, and we've covered him a lot this recruiting cycle. What a job he has done translating the connections that he didn't have in the SEC in the state of Alabama. He's done a much better job. We covered it last week in terms of reorienting the recruiting strategy to focus in the Southeast and to win these recruits. And we're seeing the results now, getting these 5-star kids from the Southeast, from the state of Alabama specifically. And I tell you what, Tide fans, there's a lot of consternation. Last year was a little rough at times. Look at the Vanderbilt game. You look at, of course, the way the season ended. Oklahoma comes to mind as well. A lot of ups and downs. We're heading into a 2025 season with a little bit of momentum, but the future is so bright, guys. And I know it sounds so weird to say that because, the future was incredibly bright. The present was incredibly bright for basically 2 decades. But I tell you what, maybe this year, I don't know if they're going to win a national title this year. We'll have to see how things go on with Ty Simpson. They could make a run at it, but that's a big question mark. 2026, I think they'll be back in the swing of being elite once again, and certainly 2027 and beyond. Kalen DeBoer, after one little course correction going from out west down to the SEC, has it figured out on the recruiting trail. And once you figure out the recruiting trail at the University of Alabama, titles follow. Saban proved it. I think Kalen DeBoer is on that same path.